doesn't prime pure white. Should have just primed pure red and the contrast. Why would you use a contrast like this application like that? If you want the vibrant, you don't see this own video monotone equation. It's like complaining if you want the vibrant coverage down with a monotone high scale.
Okay folks, you got me. Let me put this right. I'm Guy, you're watching Midwinter Minis, and a couple of days ago I put out a video where I showed you how to paint both a traditional mid-90s 2nd edition orc from the Warhammer 40k 2nd edition starter set, but also how to get a pretty good approximation using modern contrast paints and speed paints. They both turned out great, but I still preferred the vibrancy of the old paints. I was pretty happy with the contrast version, even though it ended up a bit darker and more like a contemporary orc than I wanted. Anyway, a lot of people made lots of suggestions of basically the stuff I'd done wrong in that video. A lot of people suggested that I shouldn't have used any pre-shading on the contrast version and just left it with a pure white undercoat. Lots of people also suggested ditching the Blood Angels red and the Orc flesh paints entirely and just using the newer, more vibrant Baal red for the red elements of the Goth boys and Gut Ripper flesh for their skin. Well, let's see if you were right. Here's another 90s orc goth boy ready for paint. I gave him 2 light coats of Halford's white plastic primer. It's a bit cheaper than Citadel's own brand stuff and does pretty much exactly the same job as far as I can tell. Now the proper 90s paint version took me almost 4 hours to paint, and the previous contrast version I painted took about an hour and 3/4. I've got another 17 of these dudes to paint on live streams after this, so let's crack out my old speed paint timer to see how long this version actually takes. Let's give Gut Ripper Flesh a try. Yeah, okay, that's lovely, and a way more similar tone to the classic Goblin Green that I used before, way better than the mix of Orc Flesh and Hexwraith Flame I used on the previous contrast version. Let's quickly tidy up the areas of spillover with some white paint again, and straight up Baal Red on the horns, trousers and tassels. Instead of using just wildwood on the axe handle, which ended up looking way darker than I'd have liked, I used snakebite leather with just a tiny touch of wildwood, and to save time, rather than applying different paints to both the axe handle and the pouches with unique colours, I just used this new brown for both of them. Looking pretty good. Now, that Army Painter Speed Paint Broadsword Silver did a pretty decent job for the base coat last time, so I just used it again on the axe blade, bolt pistol, and the little rivets and armour trim. Again, Black Legion contrast paint did a really good job on the blacks, being pretty much as black as a normal acrylic on the flat sections and recesses, and just allowing a tiny bit of lightness to show through on the sharp corners and edges. Whoopsie, I got a bit of black on the chin there. Let's just patch that over with some white and we'll fix it with a bit of Gut Ripper flesh in a minute. I also tidied up the white elements like the belt trim and the little skull motifs on the model while I was at it. Skeleton Horde over these scully bits, and now let's fix up the chin with Gut Ripper flesh again. While I had the green out, I also thinned it slightly and glazed it over the parts that I wanted to look a little bit darker. Kind of like reverse highlighting, leaving the brighter parts alone, looking a bit more pale, and just reinforcing the mid-tone sections. Making great time here. Black Legion again to sketch on the rough shape of the checker patterns on the white trim. But yeah, okay, that's just half an hour of painting, and yeah, you got me, this looks great. Way closer to that retro 90s look I was going for, and so much brighter than my previous attempt. Given I was pretty happy with the idea of spending about an hour and a half on each model, let's see if I can spend a few minutes with regular acrylics to make it look even fancier. Some metallic silver stippled over the blade surface to give it that rustic raggedy look, a few streaks here and there on the armour panels, and gently tapped over the rivets of the armour. I also applied this to a few select places on the bolt pistol too. Also, guess who picked up their pot of Black Legion without realising the lid wasn't closed? Luckily, I just installed this under-desk kitchen roll dispenser which has enough tension to let you rip paper one-handed, perfect for little emergencies like this. If you think this would be handy for your own hobby workspace, I've left a link to this particular model in the video description. It's already come in handy for me. Now, crisis averted, let's do a little tidy up of the rough edges on the checkers, and thinning down the Black Legion a bit, just adding a little bit of black lining around some of these silver and armour elements. And now we'll grab a really hot orangey red, Blood Orange from TT Combat should do the trick to add a subtle layer of saturated red onto the tips of the red elements to really sell that 90s look. Ogring Camo, lightened with a touch of white, makes for a pretty good highlight colour for the skin tone. Not big, bright and obvious, but useful for just smoothing out a tiny bit of the watercoloriness that contrast paints give a surface sometimes. Right, almost 50 minutes down now, and yeah, this looks really great. So similar to the 90s model I painted before. It only took about a quarter of the time, which is obviously way more feasible for army painting, with almost no drop in quality or vibrancy. Let's give him a little goblin green base. You can't really avoid that for this type of model. And now we'll take a look. Nice. Proper retro vibes with hardly any effort really. This is exactly the result I was looking to achieve in the first video, so massive thanks to all the helpful suggestions in the comments. Some people were a bit, let's just say, snarky with their suggestions, accusing me of somehow trying to sabotage my contrast version to prove a point, but no, I'm not sponsored or anything, I'm just a normal person trying stuff out, and I'm never going to get everything perfect every time. Hopefully you find this kind of experimentation useful for your own hobbying, letting me make mistakes so you don't have to. And quite frankly, I'm dead impressed that you can get such authentic results on Retro Warhammer with less than an hour per model. So I think that's my template for painting up the rest of these dudes. If you want to hang out with me and whoever else is hobbying with me that day, maybe Hattie, maybe Steve, maybe Ant, head along to our Twitch channel and follow us, twitch.tv/midwinterminis. We're still pretty new to it, but we're having a great time so far. Anyway, my big 3 takeaways from this experiment were: no pre-shading, just use a white undercoat. Vibrant colours. Avoid the muted, desaturated colours, particularly from the first wave of contrast paint. And use contrast as a starting point, and then mix in regular acrylics for the finishing touches. Well, that's it, I suppose. I just wanted to make a little follow-up video to show you that actually I was wrong, and you can get pretty awesome retro-looking models with contrast paint. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Also, just before I go, I just wanted to let you know that we've got some really cool art prints available to pre-order now. We're going to be picking them up from the place that's printing them next week, and we're going to be shipping them out then. So if you want one, grab one, because most of them are limited edition, and when they're gone, they're gone. Also, if you didn't catch the competition announcement in our previous video, you should go and watch that video because there are some really cool prizes up for grabs, and it'll get your mind ticking over about what you might want to paint for Sporktober.